Our next inspirer this morning, you already saw him yesterday, so I don't need to say too much. He's a man who's done amazing things in media, entertainment, and in technology. He comes all the way from Silicon Valley, and he's going to talk to us today about being conscious in so many different ways. Please welcome Mr. Gunther Sonnenfeld.
Bonjour. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to take a deep breath in and out. In, out. And I want you to drown out all the noise of your everyday life, the tasks, the job, the newspapers, the radios, the media, things that you've been told all your life. And for just a moment, I want you to imagine the world that you want to create. And for this moment, think about what life would be like to eat what you want, to trust the food, to trust your neighbor, to create, to make art, to make music, to be in business, not as a form of work, but as a form of passion. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does your conscience tell you? You can open your eyes now. This is going to be an ongoing process, arguably for the rest of our lives. It's obvious that certain systems aren't working anymore. It's obvious that we're not really dealing with a crisis of economics. We're dealing with a crisis of conscience. And capital is not something that is solely ascribed to money or transactions. It's something that we can create together that has real meaning and purpose. So what you see up here is a definition of capital that's in Wikipedia. And what's interesting about this, and I won't read the entire definition, is the following statement. Control of capital is the primary means of creating wealth. If a broader definition of wealth is used, say including health or well-being, then a broader definition of capital is appropriate. So through language, we are being invited to reinvent the dynamics between control, wealth, and creation. Now, normally they run at odds. They're not in parallel. They're not necessarily aligned. But these are the factors that we're dealing with. This is the operators that we are dealing with. So 91% is a number that represents the debt to GDP ratio in France right now. That means that almost the entire population is subsumed in debt as we know it, okay? That number is growing. 14% represents the number of people who are either happy or predisposed to be happy. So 91 and 14. Is that the story that represents who we are and what we want to be in this economy? Look at the man's face. This is a banker. This is right after the last crash. Is he crying because he lost millions of dollars? Because the assets went away? Or is the real tragedy here the fact that his humanity was never factored into the equation of value or his performance? Other people will mock at the idea of capital. They will say that there's plenty of resources on the earth, that there's abundance, that will never run out, there will never be a shortage. We will always be able to create and win and compete. And that's not necessarily wrong. But is that the context with which we live every day? Other people live in infinite bliss. They don't look outside their windows. They don't see dilapidated buildings and people who are homeless. They may work inside of companies and be fine going through the normative process of everyday life and work. But the fact remains is that in our minds and in our hearts, we have been compartmentalized. Since birth, we have been programmed to a certain degree, and we have been led to believe that we don't have the choice to create new realities. And this is not true. And I can tell you this personally because I have refused to believe this myth. This is not a narrative that I will subscribe to ever, and I don't want you to. So debt is commonly thought of as something owned. Wealth is something that is commonly thought of as something we accumulate and wrap our heads and our arms around. And creation is something produced. But value, real value, as we're just starting to see now in our normative history, is something created and shared. It's collaborative. It's cooperative. And so capital might be thought of as something created and shared that we, as in company, customer, and community, can all feel good about. This is possible. Capital can equal value. And it goes beyond currency, beyond what money is now. So conscious capital is a real phenomenon. It's being executed, it's being implemented, it's being talked about and thought about. And it's needs-based and it's market-driven. Let me show you what I mean by that. So GE has an energy unit. And what do? They go out into the local environment and the ecology, and they produce new methods for energy, sustainable, renewable. In the Nordic countries, they call this industrial symbiosis. It's a fancy term to say that we are going to share resources, we're going to generate ideas, and create new revenue streams by sourcing the people around us. This crazy map represents an effort that NASA, the State Department, IDEO, and Nike are doing to use citizens and their data to create better railway systems and waterways and utilities. Quirky, which is a social platform, says to its people, its subscribers, let's create new product ideas on the fly based on the things that you need to do in your everyday life. We are going to reinvent things like the bicycle. They put the ideas out, people generate them, and they create the products. They collaborate. This is another product that is more germane to your industry, which is a program called FIGHT, which Dermalogica created about 3 or 4 years ago. And they came to the realization that their supply chain was comprised of women entrepreneurs in North Africa and East Asia that were energetic and optimistic and skilled. And they decided, instead of buying the supply chain, that they were going to create programs to empower these women and generate new revenue streams. These are the emerging markets of now. Procter & Gamble, this time last year, decided to create a fund of funds to the tune of $60 million, where they were going to invite local entrepreneurs into a physical environment to build new products that they could leverage. And in a year's time, that $60 million went from a write-down, meaning they were just going to write it off on the books, to a new revenue stream that is scaling at a pace that is unprecedented. It's a cooperative. So, corporations are experiencing the shift. They're embracing the shift. They're creating the change. But we still have the crisis of conscience. Because the individual, as he or she relates to the collective, still has to understand what context looks like, has to create new narratives, and it has to be applied through creativity, and that level of participation must persist. Always. It must never die. It must never be subdued. And as Joseph Campbell said, if you want to change the world, you change the metaphor. Metaphor can be related to context. can be related to consciousness. So if we look at ourselves as whole, as progenitors of change, as creators, no matter what our vocation is, what our role in the company may be right now, the bottom line is service to self and service to others are one and the same. It starts with respecting the self. It comes from a place of love. But it means that when we collaborate and we co-create, we develop purpose and meaning. And that is constantly going to adapt, and it's constantly going to change. Now, what we're up against in our media systems, in our business models, in our economic models, is what I call the tyrannical narrative. It's fear-based. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't imagine other possibilities. And it's intended to confuse you and keep you separated from your ideas and create imbalances such that the things that you think and the things that you want to do typically don't have an opportunity to merge. Now, in the examples I showed you earlier, we experienced a transitional narrative. This is a world where love still is at the center of everything. And the desire and sacrifice we put into building businesses and scaling ideas still has prejudice. It still has anxiety and fear. But the desire and the sacrifice supersedes everything else. And where collaboration procures meaning and bravery and ownership changes. Because the collective can own the responsibility. Now, that's not easy. And it's not supposed to be. But that's what makes it fun and exciting. So the transcendental narrative, one world, that we are inevitably heading towards, whether we want to or not, is one in which we operate from unconditional love. Now, you all have the capacity to do this. We saw this yesterday. And we are just at the beginning of this new journey. So going back to Joseph Campbell, we can apply the hero's journey to the development of products and services and the creation of markets. And we have actually applied this construct in going from the ordinary world of mass media and messaging and invention and wide distribution and supply chain optimization and all these things that we know, the familiar terms, into a special world where the possibility becomes real. It can be investable, and it can scale. And we've done this all over the world. We've solved educational problems. We've solved technological problems. We've put filmmakers in a room with technologists and turned their film projects into franchises. We've done all sorts of things. We've even created new technical products on the fly, in the room that day. It's all possible. But it involves capital that we co-create, that inspires, that is cooperative, that has the meaning and purpose and the scale. And it's capital that we can invest in. And I'll tell you something. I work in the startup world. I see a lot of entrepreneurs and ideas come across my desk and in my room every day. And I commonly ask an entrepreneur, what is it that you want to do in the world? What is the purpose of this? And they typically can't answer the question, and that's okay. But the reality is, if we want to succeed on any level, the capital that we produce must be conscientious of the greater whole. We can't step out into a world that's dilapidated. We can't ignore people that are homeless. And even if we sell products and services to a market that is wealthier, has more money, has more access, we can't ignore the middle. We still have to produce. We still need to have healthy markets. This is not rocket science, people. This is a reality. So the world that we are currently creating now, whether we are conscientious of it or not, is creating tensions between the material and physical and the spiritual aspects that come from the self, from the things that we desire and the ways in which we are empowered. And the knowledge that we're sharing when we collaborate does transcend. And again, it is not easy, but it is incredibly fun, and it allows all of us, no matter who we are and what we do as lawyers, administrators, executives, leaders, investors, it all becomes a creative endeavor. So what do? We contextualize the surroundings. We take data and we use story to understand what's really going on. We develop a way of relating to others that we hadn't looked at before, and then we go and co-create. It is that simple in the methodology. And the reality is, and I'm going to ask you again, what kind of a world do you want to create that isn't about the 1% or the 99%, or the 47 or the 53 or the 91 or the 14? What kind of a world do you want to create with everyone else that is mindful of the 100%? Because I will tell you that it is possible, and we are going to do it. Thank you.
Well, there's inspiration for you. And there's a call to action. We are going to do it. We are going to change the world. Thank you so much, Gunther.